North Park resident Luis R. immigrated here from Mexico. He'd worked at the same restaurant as a line cook for 6 years. He was fired in March as the restaurant shut down because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Obviously, for my situations, it's kind of hard to find a job. I just don't like to jump in a job. So I was there for about 6 years, and they just let me go by email.
Luis has always paid taxes, but undocumented people are ineligible for unemployment benefits. And his husband, an American citizen, didn't get the federal stimulus check either. That's because they file taxes jointly. Luis began looking into relief funds for those laid off from the food service industry, but to no avail. Then, the state said it would be giving between $500 to $1,000 to some undocumented people.
I was like checking the news all the time when it's going to be this, when it's going to be this, when it's going to be this, because I want to like have a little bit of money, you know?
Nonprofit Jewish Family Service of San Diego distributes the payment in the form of prepaid debit cards. They go to undocumented people impacted by the pandemic in San Diego and Imperial counties, where around 7% of the state's undocumented population lives. The program began in May. Immediately, service providers across the state were inundated with calls. By the end of June, Jewish Family Service had distributed $5 million in funds to 10,000 undocumented people in the region. Luis was one of them. After waiting almost a month for it to arrive, he received a prepaid debit card for $500, his first type of assistance in 4 months. Restaurant worker and undocumented immigrant Rosalba was also laid off during the pandemic. Like Luis, she's been paying taxes while she's been working in the United States for the past 18 years. She said it made her feel sad because they're a community of workers who support this country with their taxes, but they don't have the same rights as citizens. They don't have the opportunity to take account of their contributions, and that frustrated her. It made her angry because she contributes to this country. Rosalba ended up getting $1,000 from the state through its emergency fund. It helped her pay her cell phone bills and buy cleaning supplies to stay safe during the pandemic. But it wasn't nearly enough to make up for her lost income. She was making $500 a week before the pandemic. And now her family is back in the same situation they were before. While the state's fund helped over 100,000 undocumented people, the problem facing the state's 2 million undocumented people remain.
The demand well exceeded the capacity of either the state or GSER. The demand was huge. You know, the state's fund, our fund, only have the sort of potential to hit a couple 100,000 people. So we knew the gap was going to be pretty large. And the goal was to essentially try to stop the bleeding for some number of families.
The organization Grantmakers Concerned with Immigrants and Refugees supplemented the state government's response with private donations to reach as many undocumented people as possible during the early days of the pandemic. Together, they're in the process of sending out $125 million in aid.
Direct relief was an important and necessary first step, but it was just that, it was a first step. There's a lot of systemic issues underlying the disparate impact of COVID on communities and who was impacted as industry disruptions happened. That really speaks to the need for sort of broader systemic change.
Dr. Kira Green of the Center on Policy Initiatives says without assistance, undocumented people will return to unsafe working conditions and get exposed to COVID-19.
People should be clear that we're not doing anything except increasing our negative health risk for all of us. We're seeing outbreaks of COVID in fields and other places where we know we force undocumented folks back into work when we don't provide protections for them.
Green says the state should raise taxes on the wealthiest Californians to expand a social safety net to undocumented people who make up 10% of the state's workforce. Because with many businesses unable to reopen with the rising numbers of coronavirus cases, the situation for San Diego's undocumented population, without jobs or government assistance, remains perilous. Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.